Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Sergey, and I'm a marketing advisor for professional services firms. The topic of this webinar is choosing the right website for your practice. The reason why I chose this topic is that I'm getting signals from practice leaders that they're still struggling with their websites, be it a website redo or figuring out how to get the best out of their websites and use it as a proper marketing tool, or whether they're opening a new practice and they want to start from a clean slate and create a website for their firms. Um, Sometimes I see that the work that could have been done in 6 months' time, on average, firms spend about 2 years to accomplish that. So that's a huge gap. That's a huge issue. And the goal of this seminar, well, one of the goals of the seminar is to provide some basic understanding of the technology, to let you know what options you have, to know the pros and cons of each option, and then for you to have as much information as needed to make a decision for yourself. What works for you, what works for your firm at the current stage of its development. So, I have 7 years of experience in web design, web development. So prior to marketing consulting, I've been doing that. But prior to that, I had a retail business, and part of that business was an e-commerce. So it was the second part of that, and I had to hire web developers and web designers to work on my e-commerce store, and so um, I am combining those three areas, which is I've been a buyer of these services, I've been a vendor or supplier of these services, and now as a marketing consultant, I get to see similar challenges at professional services firms. So I think I have something to share with you, and I hope that this webinar will be of much help to you. So these are the six chapters of this webinar. First, we're going to talk about what a website can be and what it can do for your firm. Then we're going to talk about 7 ways how to create a website, who should get involved, must-have content, how much does it really cost, and how to avoid most common pitfalls. We'll end the webinar with a Q&A. So let's get to the first chapter, what a website can do for your firm. So I wanted to uh, draw attention to what a website is from a technical perspective because I sense that some of you might not know exactly what it is. So imagine or remember opening your laptop or a computer and looking at a bunch of files and folders. Well, on your left, what you see is a bunch of folders and a bunch of files. So basically, a website is a bunch of folders and a bunch of files. This is what you get on an image. You can see that on an image to your left. If you access my website on a server, this is what you will see, right? So you see a bunch of folders. Now, on your right side, you see how a browser represents those files and folders. So what happens is when you're opening your browser and you're entering a domain name, um, what browser does, it searches for the server and then this finds it, connects to it, and then the server sends a bunch of information called response. And then based on that response, the browser represents that response and shows it to you. So that's like a general idea of how websites work. Now, what a website can be. Oh, and I wanted to mention one thing here as well. So, um, why I brought this up? The It is important to understand where the folders and the files are stored and who has access to those things. We will talk about this a little bit later as well. So, what a website can be for your firm. Now, it can be anything on a spectrum from a digital brochure to a digital office. And so, in between, what distincts each and every website is the amount of functionality and features that are available. And so the more features and the more functionality you add to your website, the more expensive it will get and the harder it will be to maintain. So if you want the cheapest website possible, then you would slide to the left toward digital brochure, toward less features and less functionality. But of course, in most cases, your professional services firm wouldn't want to have a digital brochure. But again, it's up to you, it's up to the business, it's up to the current situation you have. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in more detail later. Um, one thing I wanted to mention here as well is that when it comes to features and functionality, anything that you have ever seen on the internet, visiting other companies' websites, you can have for your website as well. It doesn't mean that you should have it, but you should know that um, you can have that if you want it. Now, what a website can do. I'm not going to talk about the self-evident basic stuff. I'm going to talk about some things that um, principals of the firms aren't necessarily aware of or paying attention to. So first one is leads. You can generate, qualify, and nurture leads. So in order to generate leads, what you can do is one of the examples is how you can do it is you would put some information like useful helpful information for your visitors and they would exchange their contact details um, in exchange for that information. So that's how you generate leads. In order to qualify leads, so let's say you have um, a lot of traffic coming in, and you not necessarily want to deal and contact all of those inquiries. Some of them might be a bad fit, and so you would put some features and functionality on your website that would qualify your leads, so you would get a better leads. Next thing is nurturing. So imagine you'd have a lot of good quality leads, and then due to the fact that it takes time to sell professional services, you'd need to spend some effort on nurturing them. So it might be, a chain of emails, monitoring their behavior, and responding to certain triggers and stuff like that. So this is something you can do. Next, website can help your account managers. By account managers, I mean people who are client facing. So let's say you don't want to invest too much in requests for proposals. You don't want to respond to too many of them. And one of the things you could do is you can create a policy, and then your account managers would be able to respond to the prospect or a client that, okay, look at our policy, we don't do that. And RFPs isn't the only thing. It's just, some things that you don't want to um, do, you might refer your clients or prospects to a certain policy, right? That's out there, it's written. It's not like I came up with it just now, okay? Another thing that could be helpful is to describe the process and have it available on display on your website as well. This is, clients love that stuff that, okay, you have a process. It's not something that, we approach one project this way, the other project we approach that way. No, it's like we have a general process and it's for everyone involved and for every client and for every engagement that we um, approach and engage in. We have a process. We know how to do things. So that's another way how it can be helpful to have that on your website. Another thing is case studies could be a big help to your account managers. So if, let's say, your client is asking you, okay, so you're offering me, let's say, um, a new service, and have you done anything like that before? And instead of just saying yes, and you have to take my word for it, you can, or account manager can send a link to your prospect or client and show them, okay, here's what we've done. Here's how it played out. Here's how we tackled the challenges that were there. So a case study is another thing that could be of big help. Next one is talent. Now, whether you're hiring or not at the moment, gathering emails, gathering resumes is a good idea, right? So you might be in need of that in the future. So your website can help you with that. Also, it can help you with qualifying people that are sending those emails, resumes. So you can have a bunch of questions that people need to answer in order for you to see who is a better fit for your firm. Next one, clients. So here, for instance, you can build online tools for your clients. You can, like, calculators, for instance, FAQs, series, tips, video tutorials, stuff like that. It's only available to your clients. That would be a big help. You can also publish all sorts of insights and white paper or research, and make it available only to clients. Let's say through a dashboard, right? You can have a, a client dashboard that they can access their resources. They can access the documents that were developed specifically for them, for their engagement. So a lot of things, how you can enhance the value you're providing to your clients. And website can help with that. Next one is productivity. So here you can automate tedious tasks, something like repetitive jobs, that sort of stuff. You can have a lot of API integrations with third parties, like social media or whatever tools you're using. That could be a great help. IP monetization is another thing. You can create webinars like this one, and then if a webinar is of high quality, so it can either be available to certain client types, or you can sell it for free. Oh, I'm sorry, you can sell it, or you can give it away for free, or for an exchanging for an email or something. You can sell courses. You can offer books. You can sell research. So all through your website too, right? Next one is marketing. Here you can use your website to monitor user behavior, like what's more, like what most resonates with them, what gets shared most. I mean the content, um, what what people read most, how they go from one page to another page, right? So how they think. Um, you can also sequence certain things. So let's say a return visitor uh, goes to read an article, and then they click on services. So, and then they go back, let's say, to an article. Okay, maybe it's a good idea um, to bring out a pop-up that would suggest them to sign up, things like that. So let's move on to the next one, 7 ways how to create a website. Now I'm going to be talking about those 7 ways, and then I'm going to be describing the pros and cons of each of those ways you can create a website for your firm. Now, here are the 7 ways, or 7 options. Free DIY, open source software, free DIY online website builder, subscription-based website builder, low-cost fixed price website, custom-made website, in-house build website, AI build website. All right. So first, let's start with free DIY open source software. So open source means it's free. Okay. And the good thing about that is that you have all the files, and you can do whatever you want with those files since you are in the possession of those files. You can change them. You can do whatever you want. On the downside, you there are no guarantees, right? But um, open source software such as Drupal, Joomla, Magento, WordPress, they've been around for so long that they are very reliable. So there wouldn't be any troubles using those, like major problems using that software. Now, regarding the pros or advantages, it's free and it's proven. You have a large pool of developers. Uh, many of that software, many of those software products have built-in CMS, which is content management system. And since you have all of the files, you have more control over your web application. Now, the disadvantages are, first of all, that it's going to be vulnerable and I'd say more vulnerable due to the fact that it's open source. So people who know how to code can explore the code and would know where to hit it. Okay. Next disadvantage is, updates and upgrades. You would be responsible for those, you solely. So you are the one responsible. You would have to monitor um, if whether or not the software is up to date, and accordingly make changes to the source code that your project would require. Next disadvantage is, especially with WordPress, there's so many third-party plugins that, and a lot of them are free, that people tend to like overuse them and put and add so many of those third-party plugins that functionality drops, and then the security issues arise because some of those third-party creators, they're not very um, honest, let's put it that way. So there's a risk of having some malicious code in there and stuff like that. Next one, free DIY online website builder. So here, uh, the the example, I would give you the example right away. So it's Weebly, Wix. It's a little bit different from DIY open source software because you don't get to have all the files. You don't get to download all the files, but you can you go to wix.com, for instance, and you can start building your website over there. So the advantage would be that it's free, right? It's usually drag and drop, so it's pretty much you don't need to learn how to code to do a good job with the website. And those who are proficient with working with these platforms, they know their stuff. They can do a decent job, but there are limitations to what they can do. So the disadvantages would be if you're trying to do it yourself, there would be a very steep learning curve. You just have to acknowledge that. It will take you a while to figure out how to use them. The next major disadvantage is that you're going to be stuck with that platform. So they will never allow you to download everything, like every single piece of the files, because you will not have access to uh, the backend stuff, the stuff that they don't provide you access in the first place. So just downloading your website and thinking that I will be able to download all of my stuff and deploy it somewhere else and it will work. No, it's not like that. You won't be able to download everything so it works right away. So just keep that in mind. Well, think about the business model of these companies, right? So they want to make money, and obviously they will try to do everything they possibly can to make you stay on the platform, right? So that's another disadvantage. Next one, as I've mentioned, is a limited functionality. Often these platforms are slower than other ways than other um, platforms. And another huge disadvantage is that if they shut down their business, your website goes offline, right? Because it's because it's stored on their servers. So that's something to keep in mind. If they shut down the business, you're out of business as well. Well, your website is out. Next one, subscription-based website builders. Now, some of the advantages. Oh, I'll give you the examples. So this would be Shopify, Squarespace, Webflow, HubSpot, things like that. So, what are the advantages here? They're rather easy to use. They have a lot of tutorials, documentation, um, videos. You can watch that and learn. It's pretty comprehensive. Now, the maintenance is automatic, so you don't have to worry about updates and upgrades. It's pretty seamless. It's good. They have a good amount of features and a lot of customization options. So um, it's a solid it's a solid way how to build a website. The disadvantages would be like with the previous one, you would get stuck with that platform. You will have some limitations to the functionality because you do not have access to all of the files. Um, Most of the things that you can do are front facing, like user facing, like what you see. So you won't have a lot of access to things on the back end, some processes and logic that you might want to incorporate into your website. You will not be able to do that. So limited functionality. Next one is if you stop paying for whatever reason, then your website is gone, usually like in 60 days or so. Depends on the platform. And of course, like with the previous one, if they go out of business for whatever reason, which is out of your control, your website will be no more. And since you can't download everything and keep it for yourself, well, it just goes away. Next one, low cost, fixed priced websites. Okay, here's something you might encounter when you're, let's say, Googling a website, web designer or web design agency or web developers and things like that. So you would encounter a lot of ads offering you to build a website for 250, 300, $400, right? And so that is a benefit, right? So it's a very low cost. You don't need to search for web developers and web designers. It's fast turnaround usually. Like within a couple of days, you're gonna get your website. So um, the disadvantages are that, um, well, depending on the tech that they're using, so either they're using open source software or they're using something like Wix, you will get the disadvantages of the underlying software. Usually they promise the moon, and the ad would go something like, get a unique website for $300, and well, you will get a promise of a moon, but you'll be lucky if you get a, a moonlight. High risk of malicious code is another disadvantage because they're very cheap. Um, Very expensive customization. So they think the business model that they have, because you have to think about it when you're hiring someone, you have to think about this. Like if they're selling a a website for $300 and the marketplace is very competitive because you can see there are a lot of ads, a lot of similar ads. So they're spending something like $50 per ad, and then they still need to pay developers. probably somewhere far away, and so they would have to pay their developers, and they still need to make a profit. And so what you get in terms of how many hours they spend is probably worth like $150 in terms of hours that they'd spend on building your unique website. So uh, whether it's possible or not to make a unique website for $150 is, well, to me, it's very, very, very unlikely. But it's up to you to decide on that. The expensiveness of customization comes with the fact that um, they sell templates basically, and they make money by being fast. So anything that goes to customizing the prepackaged stuff that they already pushed to you, well, they will charge you a lot more. So it wouldn't it will be in the thousands, right? Um, Next one, custom made websites. Here, the advantages would be you don't have any limitations. You get full control. You get most value for your money. You would have a unique solution tailored to your specific business objectives. All right. But of course, this will be more expensive, and the maintenance will be on you, meaning that you will have to pay for maintenance. Either you will have people who will do the maintenance on your at your firm, or you would have to hire someone who will do the maintenance for you. Here, you can use any framework or any open source software. Next one, in-house built websites. Here the idea is that you hire a bunch of people, like a web designer or web developer, to develop a website for your firm for your needs, right? So you have full control of the process. You get unlimited revisions and changes. You would have people who know how to maintain the website because they've built it, right? So it's a decent option to have too, but it only makes sense if you have other uses for these people, because you would get one of the disadvantages that if you're hiring these people, you would have to, you know, deal with all the challenges that comes with payroll and motivation and training and things like that. In addition, you would need a project manager to oversee the project, right? Someone would have to manage these people um, and the project. So maintenance is on you, and the limitations to what these people can build are based on the skills that they have, right? So uh, if you've hired people who can't do certain things, then well, you don't have um, the ability to create what you want, or you'd have to ask them to learn specific skills. And you can use any framework or web builder or software to do that. Now, next one is, I think it was the last one, is AI build websites. So there is an opportunity to create an AI build website. It's very fast to do that. Uh, Something like of a weird benefit is that they don't give you a lot of choice, right? Because they sort of prompt you um, to answer some questions, and then here you go, here's your website. So it is beneficial in terms of that you don't get stuck with too many options. Because when we have too many options, we kind of lose it. And then in terms of the disadvantages, well, first of all, the unpredictability. Next one, at the moment, it's more buzz than the actual thing. you have very little control of what's going to be the end result. You'd have to learn how to prompt those AI tools in order to get good results. So there's a learning curve there. Another question is the ownership of the files, right? So if they you know once they've built the website for you, do you have the files, right? Because that's really important. All in all, I'm not a big fan of AI build websites, but I mean, you can take a look at that option as well. So the last one, actually, the bonus option is a specific industry website. So what I mean by that is that, well, depending on your industry, let's say you're an accountant or a lawyer or an engineer, human resources, you know, you you would be able to find web developers and web designers who serve particular vertical. And the the advantages of that is that the websites would be tailored to your specific business objectives, to your needs. You would most probably have the relevant features, which is good for you. Um, you would get to have a conversation with people who speak your language, like the industry language, so you'd be able to easier understand one another. And then you might get some insight from these people because they are serving the industry you're in, so they might offer you some advice on how to proceed with whatever you're trying to do. So that's advantage. In terms of disadvantages, well, their business model might be a huge disadvantage for you. So maybe they only want to, let's say, have a retainer, and you have to pay, let's say, $2, $3,000 per month, whether you use your website as a marketing tool or not. But you just have to continue paying them, right? So um, look at the options that they're offering. Um, then the platform that they're choosing to build the website for you, it's up to them. You can't have a say on that, right? Whatever they choose, because they've already packaged the product, and what they're offering is like, here you go. These are the things that we would be able to customize, but here is how your website will be, right? And so that might be something that you wouldn't necessarily agree, the platform, I mean. And then customization, of course, is very expensive too. So these were the what, 8 or 9 options? I haven't counted them, but a lot of options for you. Okay, we're moving on to the next chapter. The next chapter is who should get involved. Stages of web development. Now, um, so depending on the option, one of those options that you're gonna choose for yourself, the stages of web development will be different, right? And I'm going to describe uh, the stages that are pertinent to the custom website. Okay, so first one is planning. Um, the first step you should consider is sit down and plan what you want to have. What are your business objectives? And based on those business objectives that you have for your firm, um, figure out what functionality would support those business objectives. And next would be think about the stages of rolling out your website. It isn't necessarily a good idea to, spend 2 years working on a website in order to create everything you want. So, a website is a thing that you can add more stuff to it later. And so, it's best to focus on a let's say fixed timeline of let's say 6 months, and have your website launched with key functionality, and then continue investing and working and monitoring your website and adding more features to it as time goes by. So the first part is planning, because you can have everything for your website. Doesn't mean that you should have everything, right? But you understand that. Okay, next one, prototype. So in order to avoid months and months of redos, it's best to um, spend some time creating a prototype of your web application. And by a prototype, I mean, the crude version of what pages we're going to have, what will be the relationship of certain, what is it, the so-called sitemap, what's going to be more important, what's going to be less important, um, things like that. So prototype is a very, very crude version, but it helps a lot with avoiding unnecessary redos at later stages. Here's an example um, of how this is actually wireframes, right? These are called wireframes. Um, this is something that it isn't necessary to do that, and of course it will cost you additional money, but it's just a way for you to have an idea of how your website will work, and it doesn't necessarily show you how it will look, but you would see the relationship of what's happening when I push this button, things like that, right? So it's a good thing to have because it saves time at later stages, but it isn't a necessary thing, like a must have. All right. Okay, next, design, user interface, and user experience. So with regard to graphic design, um, so once you have your prototype ready, if you decide to do that, the next step would be, prior to developing your website, you need to have an idea how things will look. So the colors, typography, um, the visual hierarchy, things like that. Buttons. So what user interface is, the stuff that's on every page, right? So for every meaningful page, for every important page, you want to have a mock-up of how things should look. So you can think about, like I said, buttons, text, colors, everything that you see on your screen, right? It's best for you to have a graphic designer create the user interface for every important page on for desktop version, for tablet, for mobile phone, um, in order for you again to not get yourself involved in too many redos at a later stage. So that's UI stuff. Then UX, user experience, that's something. Um, okay, user experience is how things interact with one another. So what happens when you uh, press the button, let's say, how does it feel? How objects interact with one another, how they respond to user behavior, right? So it is a good thing to pay attention to, but since you're not a mobile app like Instagram or Facebook or things like that, I wouldn't pay too much attention to user experience, right? Because UX can be very expensive, and but you should have some general idea of how how objects respond to user behavior. Here's an example of mockups that graphic designers do. So on your left is a desktop mockup. On your right, some examples of mobile mockups. Um, Another thing I wanted to mention is that graphic designers are not usually not web designers. So if you're hiring a graphic designer, they will be able to create those images for you. But that doesn't mean that it is a website. It's just the image. Okay. Next, stages of web development, back end, front end. Okay. So once you know, based on your business objectives, what features you want to build, and based on the mockups, the graphic design that you did of the user interface. Um, so now you know how things should look. You would move to web development, and the web development consists of two parts. And I'm describing the process for custom-made website, right? For other stuff, you not necessarily it's a two component thing, but for in our case, it's you have backend development and you have front end development. Now, backend stuff is things that you do not ever see on your screen, or users don't ever see that. So there's some logic that's happening behind the curtain. Let's say someone is trying to make a transaction through your website, and then you would, the website would check with database information that you have. Um, it might connect to a third party, some logic that's happening on the back end. You don't see that, but it's part of web development. And then there is a front end development. That's UI and UX that I've talked about. Um, Here is an example. On your left, you can see the backend code. So let's see, one language. In this case, it's PHP. And on the right, you see front end code. You can see that on the right image. You can see that at the bottom left. There's the code. Now, since these are different um, programming languages that are used to create that, you might have to hire two different people or an agency that have these people, right? One would be the backend developer, the other one would be a front end developer. What else did I want to mention here? Dependencies, APIs. Yeah, so based on the functionality, you might want to rely on third-party dependencies and certain libraries if you're going to accept payments, if you're chaining events, things like that. So something to keep in mind as well, right? Next one, content. Now um, the content has to, well, not has to, but the content can run in parallel with the web development. But it shouldn't be done after your website is done, because you would want to have your text and images available for to web developers, especially those working on the front end, so that they would know how to incorporate them properly so they look nice. All right. And so when it comes to content creation, it's best to start it as early as possible and run it in parallel to the back-end development and front-end development. Next, the next stage would be testing and deployment. So once the website is ready, the web developers would test it on their servers, and they might even provide you access to the version that's being tested. And after that is done and everything looks good, then comes deployment. Usually happens within 1 to 2 days. Then there's analysis and monitoring and looking at what's working, what's not working, and planning future changes and adjustments and additional features and stuff like that. So, oh, here I wanted to mention that it's a good idea to incorporate a or to add a GA4, which is Google's analytics thing, that allows you to gather some data on user behavior, what's being viewed, what's being clicked, things like that. Okay, next one. Who should get involved? Now let's talk about the decision makers. Okay, now based on what we've discussed, um, based on the process, we can now start thinking about who should get involved. First of all, when it comes to the business objectives, people who are in position to make decisions, like business decisions, should get involved, right? Whoever sets the objectives for the website should get involved in doing that. Same people who are responsible for budget, scope, timeline, they should get involved at that stage. Then, when it comes to doing the mock-ups, user interface, maybe a prototype, you should involve graphic design. Then, then come the backend developer, who would, based on the functionality that's required, will start creating your website, the back end of it. Then a front-end developer should get involved, and they can work in parallel with back-end developers. Then you'd need someone who is responsible for content creation, and you would also want to have a project manager assigned, right? You don't want to have a commission of 5 people um, working on that because it will just postpone the acceptance of the final product. So you'd want to have a project manager, like someone like a single person who would be responsible for um, getting the website done for your firm. Okay, the next one is managing the website. So once the website is done, and you can think about it in terms of building a house. So once you've built yourself a townhouse, for instance, it isn't necessarily the case that the house you've built will be maintenance free, right? So from time to time, you would need to invite someone to um, do some maintenance work, right? And then, well, at least once a week, you'd have to do some cleaning as well. And so with website, it's similar. So on the one hand, you need someone who is capable of managing the website, and I mean, someone should be trained to add content to it. Someone should be able to edit it, to remove some stuff that isn't necessary, to add additional pages, things like that. So you'd want to, whoever you hire to build you a website, they should be responsible for training your people uh, to be able to manage the website. some service providers, some web developers, they don't do that. They don't provide training as by default. So you should keep that in mind and explicitly put that into writing that you want that, and that's part of the deal that you're signing up for. And then so the managing part is one part, but then the maintenance part is another part. So like I said, the website would have to have upgrades and updates, and sometimes if there are any API integrations, reliance on third parties, then some of those things might stop working. And so you need someone who can just put this all back together if things are starting to fall apart. All right, next one, must have website content. So here, um, here, here are several things that I wanted to talk to you about. First one is copy. And copy is what you see, the texts, right? The text that you see when you visit someone's website. Some things I want you to know that I would I would want you to avoid. Um, First one, don't write generic stuff. And here's an example of how a generic stuff works. So I've asked an AI assistant to create a website for me, and this is what the generic copy looks like. So you'll be able to read it later, but the main idea how to test whether it's generic or not, if you can swap the name of your firm with any other firm and it still makes sense, then it's a generic stuff. So try to avoid doing that. Next one is avoid boasting, avoid exaggerations, don't copy paste, and avoid all the things that are um, advertised to you as SEO, like latest SEO hacks, right? That stuff doesn't work. It used to work like 15 years ago. It doesn't work anymore. Next, visuals. So some things like okay, visuals is graphic design, user interface, colors, typography, things like that. So some things you want to avoid, color galore or blandness, right? So you don't want to have too many colors, and you don't want to have like everything in gray, right? Or everything in one color. Usually, um, usually it's when things are bland, people don't want to pay attention to those things. So next one, don't use multiple typefaces. Typefaces is basically a font that you see like on this slide right over here. So I have one typeface. It's called Laura, I think, and it's just for a headline, I'm using a bold version of it and slightly larger, and just for the body, I'm using whatever I'm using. So uh, if you don't know how to pair typefaces, and usually it's just people who are obsessed with typography, or graphic designers, people like that, they know how to pair fonts or typefaces. So the best thing to do is, first of all, avoid Comic Sans, and then the second, just use one typeface if you're not sure how the typography is properly paired together. Next one, avoid stock images because they're all over the place and they're cringy. Next one, avoid hefty images. By hefty, I mean if you take a photo on your iPhone, let's say, and it's 5 MB in size, don't ever put that on your website. The images have to be um, properly scaled and downsized, and there are ways how to properly create the necessary images that are required for your website to display them for mobile devices, for desktop, for tablets. So different screen sizes will require you to have different images. So just keep that in mind too. Um, Avoid being non-responsive. So I've seen a lot of firms still have not adopted the mobile era, and well, since like more than 50%, I think, of the traffic comes from mobile devices, it is a good idea to, for your website to be available to your prospects on a mobile device. And so they should be able to read, right? To see the images, to be able to click the buttons. So make sure your visuals are, and your website in general is responsive to different screen sizes. Um, and the last one, incongruous. So here, just pay attention to the overall image of your website. It should, the components you use in terms of visuals, they should they should stick together well, right? So there aren't major contradictions in terms of visual hierarchy, colors, sizes, and all sorts of stuff. Just like so that the general image of your website is, um, what would you call it? Well, not incongruous. Okay, next. Next must-have website content is team. So, oh, by the way, actually, I'm looking at my notes, and um, with regard to visuals, I wanted to add one more thing. So the website should be distinct from your competition, yet familiar to the category, right? And the visual representation should match the message. So these are two things I wanted to add to that. All right, so team. Right. So, with regards to the team, here's something that you want to do. So, the more people you add to your website who are actual employees, the better. You want to have content and the photos, the headshots of people, and the things that you write, like a short bio of those people. You want it to be professional, and you want it to be consistent with what your firm is about. Okay. Next one is employee filters. If you have a lot of employees, it's best to provide filtering as well on the website. So it's easier for whoever is, be it a prospective client or a, a job candidate. So it's easier for them to find people who they're looking for. Next, provide links to LinkedIn if your people have those profiles, and encourage people to open those profiles on LinkedIn. Next, um, provide links to case studies. So let's say your people were involved in certain projects for which you have created case studies. So link those people to those case studies so that your clients and prospects can see and can understand the skills and experience of the people who they're going to get involved with, because buyers want to know who who will provide the services, right? The professional services are very different from products, right? Because it's the people who are going to be interacting with the client, and so clients want to know who will be serving them, right? And so the more information they can get about the people who they're going to work with, the better for the client, right? It removes uncertainty. It's a good idea to do that. Um, and also, yes, the links to thinking of of these people. So I would encourage you to encourage your people to write articles and or blog posts, um, and then link to that insight. Next one, service offerings. That's something you should have as well. Something to avoid with service offerings. Don't put like multinational cuisine buffet, right? You don't want to list all of your services on your website because it sort of proves that you have no special interest in one particular area. So you should think deeply about what your service offerings are, and the less you put in, the better. But I would suggest not going for generic stuff like we do tax or we do litigation. Um, but it's a separate thing, and I don't want to get into that at the moment. So what I want to uh, let you know is that so first avoid that multinational buffet, then avoid front and center commodities, and then don't use hollow placeholder titles as well, right? So your services that you're putting out there on your website should mean something, right? So the client or prospect should look at the service and understand, oh, okay, it is for me, or it's not for me, or okay, I need to find out more about this because this piqued my interest. Okay, next one. Insight. Okay, so here with insights, you want to give your buyers enough evidence so they can come to a conclusion that you're an expert, right? And you should give them as much information as needed so that they can decide for themselves whether you're a good fit or not. In terms of websites, in terms of the insight, what you might want to do is create articles, create white papers, publish some research data, publish webinars, record video FAQs, things like that. You know, anything that's helpful to your clients, anything that brings more value to your clients. Next one, career page. This is the stuff. Oh, sorry. Oh, let me go back. Yeah. Career page. So you're as a professional service firm, you are in the market for both talent and clients. So your website should have a career page, uh, which should be attractive to the people that you consider to be a good fit as employees for your firm. So you should think about a career page where these people can find out about the culture, see the people um, who who are potential colleagues, things like that. Next, external validation is, well, it's basically testimonials, maybe publications somewhere, or links to publications to let's say industry magazine or things like that. So you want to not only to claim something, but you want to provide external validation. All right, I hope that makes sense. Next one, how much does it really cost? Okay, so if you remember, we talked about a digital brochure and all the way to digital office. So when it comes to digital brochure, you can get it for like $200. You can go to Fiverr.com and hire someone from far, far away, and they would create a digital brochure for you using a template, let's say WordPress template. It's doable because it takes them like 2 hours of work. Not a problem. So, but as you move more towards a digital office, the more functionality you add, the more expensive your website will be. Um, so it's, why would it be so expensive? Well, the analogy would be like if you're hiring an architect and an interior designer to create an office space for your firm, right? If you're buying a template from an architect, it's going to be lower in price than if you're asking an architect and an interior designer to create a space for you, for your firm, like unique stuff. So the more unique uh, the things you want to have for your website, the more expensive it will get, right? Makes sense. So um, here is a calculator that you can use on my website for free. The link is below the image. It will allow you to go through things like, design mockups, infrastructure that you need, how many pages, how much of an SEO, search engine optimization you need to do, things like that. If you visit that, it will give you a good idea of how much a website can cost you, right? Because it shows you what goes into calculating a price for a website. So I suggest you take a look at that as well. Um, I will not be able to tell you um, how much you should spend on your website because I don't know the specifics and the specific challenges and specific business objectives of your firm. So I'm just giving you the overall information and in hopes that it's helpful. Okay. Now, what's the best option for you? So, first of all, um, if you are a professional service firm that is long-term oriented, right? Um, then you need to plan for, let's say, you're going to be in business for the next 10 years. If you are, then my recommendation would be to create a website that you can own. And what I mean by that is that you should aim at uh, having all of the files, all of the folders, everything, the content, everything should belong to you. You should not rely on any third parties. Okay. Next, the technology that you're going to use should be the one that's been proven and has had been around for a while in the market. You don't want some obscure proprietary technology, right? That's only available to one firm or two firms. So just the reason for that is that um, things change and you would want to have access to people who will be able to maintain and make changes to your website. And so the larger the pool of those developers, the easier for you to find people who will be able to help you with upgrades, updates, and adding some more features to your website. So that's first thing to keep in mind. Oh, the most widespread languages, like the one I'm using, for instance, PHP. Basically, it's used for backend, and then the front end is JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So if you have, and by the way, PHP developers are, one of those most uh, in abundance people, I think. Well, I haven't looked at the latest data, but there are a lot of PHP developers. So if you're building your website using PHP, JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, you're going to be fine. Yeah, that's everything you ever need. Next, current size requirements and trajectory of your firm. So, for instance, if you know that you're going to be adding 20 more people next year, you would always start thinking about, okay, what do we need for our office space, right? How much furniture, what sort of furniture do we need? Do we have enough space? What sort of equipment do we need to purchase? Things like that, right? So the same is true with regard to your website, using it as a marketing tool. So you need to think about your current size of the firm, what it needs right now in terms of business objectives. So what functionality do you need to support your business objective, to support your people who are client facing, who are doing the technical work? So how can you help them with your website? And then you have to look at the trajectory, okay, how we're moving forward, and what functionality will we need in at the later stages. Next one, you want to think about the things such as selling the firm. So, for instance, if you're deciding that you're gonna let go of your firm, maybe you're selling it, maybe you're merging it, or something like that. When you're thinking about the website, you'd have to think about who would pay any money for my website. I- If I'm shutting the firm down, will I be able to sell my website as a standalone thing, right? If I'm merging, what's going to happen? Well, is the buyer going to um, pay extra money for the website that I have, or they're just going to get rid of it? So there's something to keep in mind when developing a website for you, because in many times, the websites that are out there are so there's been a lot of effort put into it, but in terms of the market value, there's no market value. So if you're investing in your website, you should think in terms of, will I be able to sell it? Or is there any value in a website as a marketing tool in and of itself? So there's something to keep in mind too. Next one, relying on third parties is also something you shouldn't um, entertain a lot, because if the third party shuts down, well, part of your functionality shuts down as well. So keep that in mind too. And the last one is, okay, how much should it cost? Well, like I said, there's no definitive answer, but here's how you can approach this. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're opening a new practice area. Like you're gonna have 10 people working on that new practice area. Let's say in a different state, for instance, a totally different market. You're thinking about maybe give them different brand name. Then you're gonna need a totally new website. So you want to start from scratch, and you're planning that next year they're gonna have like 1.5 million in net fees. So the way you're going to approach this is your marketing budget should be around 5%, right? So um, that's 75,000, right? When you look at the website isn't the only uh, the only thing that's in your marketing budget, right? So you need to do seminars, you need to do some advertising, some other stuff, right? Website is a thing that you would want to invest in, but the investment should be considered in like periods of 3 years. So let me explain it to you a little bit different. So if you have your, let's say, $75,000 marketing budget based on your fees, on the net fees of 1.5 million. So what you're looking at is uh, the first year is 75, the second year is 75, third is 75. Now, your website the investment in your website would look something like 20 to 30,000 first year, like 10 to 20,000 second year, and around 15,000 in the third year, right? So this is how you should look at it. And then after a while, you would be adding some more features. That will be a separate budget. And then after, let's say, 5 years, you should plan for a redo of your website, because that's generally um, the pace at which websites tend to get outdated. So this is how you approach this. Also, one thing to keep in mind is that once you open the website, it's not going to generate traffic. So you should plan for the lead generation for your website, and that means paying to LinkedIn, paying to Google um, to get some visitors to your website, relevant ones. Okay, and this is the last one, the sixth one. The sixth one before we go to Q&A. Avoiding most common pitfalls. So, first pitfall you want to avoid is we'll know it when we see it. People, well, I've encountered this many times that people have no idea how the website, like the end product, should look like, but they're very certain in their ability to identify the good work. And so this is a common pitfall. It ends with frustration, constant redos, and instead of doing a website in 6 months, things get way out of hand, and the project after 2 years is not complete. Next one, committees. Um, Try not to form any committees about around your website. Have just one project manager who is responsible. Because people tend to, be in doubt, well, obviously, because they're not professionals in the field of web design, web development, and so they tend to ask around, right? So they form a committee. Okay, if we all agree that we like everything, but then we sort of are in doubt, and then we're going to ask our wives and our husbands, and then we're going to ask our kids, and then we're going to ask a friend of a friend and stuff like that. So just not a good idea. It never works, and you can't please everyone, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Next one, do not shut down old websites. So if you have an old website, and many principals think about it this way, that I have an old website, and I've seen this vision of a new website, and I'm so excited about it, so I just don't want to see the old website anymore, so I'm just gonna shut it down. It's not a good idea to do that. Don't do that. Next one, come up with a deadline. So set yourself a goal, like we have to get the website done in 6 months. That's it. Do not overextend that to, let's say, oh, okay, we need to think about it. Let's add another month, and another month, and another month. Just stick with the deadline. And if you need to cut uh, some of the functionality that isn't that important, it's better to do that rather than just keep extending the deadline and the website is never ready. Another one, some red flags when you're hiring a web designer, web developer. If they're asking for full prepayment, that's a red flag. If they're not bargaining, if they're not ready to discuss how you can change your the budget, uh, the scope of the project, that's a red flag as well. Because as I've shown, the website can be, starting from a digital brochure all the way to digital office. So the features and functionality can be added and subtracted. So a good web developer can have an open discussion about that. People who are available right now, like the very moment, that's also a red flag. Professional web designers are usually in demand, and they need some time to, you know, to accommodate your needs. Anyone who's offering unlimited revisions, that's also a red flag. So usually um, they're just selling templates to you, right? That's how they the templates that they've already done for someone else, they're just reselling them to you, and it seems like as if they're working, but they're not, right? They're not creating something for you. They're just sending you stuff that they've created for someone else. So unlimited revisions is a red flag. Anything that's too good to be true, like promising the moon and then you're not even seeing the moonlight, um, that's a red flag. And fast turnaround also is a red flag. It's something that can be done like super, super fast. Like, well, we'll get your website in 2 days. A unique website in 2 days. That's also a red flag. Hiring the cheapest always backfires. You can become a hostage to these people, or your website rather can become a hostage. Then there's a risk of malicious code. These people tend to ghost you, and they tend to leave for greener pastures. Ownership. So make sure you have full control of the files. That's very important. And the last one is set your expectations lower, right? The analogy is if you're opening a brand new store, let's say a toy store, for instance, somewhere in town, then you would imagine that, oh, people would see my store and they would visit. I will get visitors, right? Because it's a new store, new thing. On the internet, it doesn't work that way. You don't get traffic by just opening your website. It doesn't work that way. So you'd have to invest in driving the traffic to your website. Just keep that in mind. All right. This is the end of the webinar. Here is my contact details. Feel free to send me an email. You can follow me on LinkedIn and ask your questions there as well. And now we're going to go to the Q&A. Thank you.